it's a bit of a trite statement, regulating for tomorrow today, regulating for the future today. And perhaps for most of us in this room, it's already in our DNA because we know this business is a very long-term business. But I really want to stress that the decisions that we're making now are going to affect this sector for a very long time. And that's as it should be, because what we need to do is make decisions that deliver a sustainable sector for customers today and in the long term, for the environment today and in the long term, and deliver the sort of sustainable, stable sector that actually attracts precisely the sort of investment that Richard was talking about a moment ago. It's essential that this sector steps up to the challenges it's facing in a way that delivers that continued stability and continuity, because that way we can deliver what all of our constituents need, including our investment community that have helped fund that £100 billion investment over the last 22 years. For a start, I was just wondering how many of you here saw the recent Panorama programme. It was called Drinking Our Rivers Dry. It was a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, I see a few nods. Okay, that's helpful, at least we're on the same page. One of the reasons that this was particularly interesting was, again, this is a debate we've been having, but this was a debate being had on primetime TV about why is there a desalination plant in London? People were asking the question about why is the volume of water traded roughly about the same as the total amount of leakage from our largest water company. And these were the sort of questions that were being put, certainly to me, by the interviewer during this particular interview. But the most interesting thing about this programme for me was this debate that we're having about how important our water resources are and how we need to make long-term choices for the future, for a sustainable future, is no longer confined to those of us who are in the sector. It is a much wider debate. People are asking these questions and asking us to step up to the mark to deliver for that future. And I've done something funny with that, but what you see here actually is, I think, the very river that Richard was talking about, and this is the sort of thing that happens when we get it wrong. This is the sort of thing that happens when we don't use this scarce resource effectively, and you're probably a bit surprised, why is OfWat doing the environmental slide? But it's not just damaging the environment in the short term. When you go to this river to abstract water for your customers in the future, it's not there. We really do have to tackle this now. And I think what's interesting to me is that we have actually come to a broad conclusion as to the challenges that we are facing here. The need to use this scarce resource efficiently, the need to value it, the need to ensure that we develop a sustainable sector, as sustainable for the next 25 years as it has been for the past. And we've been looking at this debate and seeing it go wider and wider. These are just most recent comments that we've seen following that Panorama programme in various different forums. And again, people are asking the question. So how do we get to answers? Well, we've been doing plenty of blue sky thinking, as I say. We at OfWat, as you'll know, launched our future regulation programme really just as soon as we finished the last periodic review, asking ourselves these fundamental questions. How can we make regulation fit for the future in the long term? And we've had a wide range of discussion papers and engagement with all of you in this room. And actually, I'd like to thank you for your input, because it really has enriched that debate about what are the challenges and how are we going to step up to them. Where we're at now is we need to move from that blue sky thinking and start making it real. And I want to share with you today our emerging thinking on just two areas. Now, there's an awful lot going on, and those of you who are working with us will know about that. But I wanted to just pick out a couple of areas and explain to you how the broader thinking is turning into something real in terms of proposals. And the two areas I want to talk to you about is the issue of water resources. And in the issue of water resources, I want to talk to you about two things that we're doing. One is a package of measures to facilitate better use of available water resources out there. So already, I mean, half the water abstracted from the environment is abstracted for public water supply, but the other half is out there being used by other people. And there may be other people with water resources who could develop them more efficiently and provide those as a resource to the sector. So that's one set of issues we're looking at. And the second one is, how can we improve incentives for the existing industry? Similarly, they need to know, are they efficient enough? Are they cost effective enough to be worth their while making this resource available at the cost that they know they can produce it at? So we're looking at the possibility of developing a price to beat that would again be transparent and allow people to see these opportunities. And finally, as part of this package, we're thinking about how could we increase pressure on existing incumbent companies to contract with more efficient operators for water resource. And I know Severn Trent, and I think Tony will be talking to you later today or tomorrow, suggested, for example, that could be done by means of an element of compulsion in the water resource management plan. So we're looking at that. So together we're looking at a package there to see how we can improve the opportunities for people who have resources to make them available into the system. In parallel with that, we're looking at, and again this echoes something that Richard mentioned, what are the incentives that we can put in place for existing incumbents to use those resources or to trade between themselves where it is efficient? And we know there are some trades. We're not denying that there's trading in this sector. There clearly could be more. And I haven't put up the water resource map you've all seen me use so frequently to show how that might be possible. And one thing, again, this is a package, and one thing we're looking at is moving in setting price limits to setting long-term outcomes instead of short-term outputs. Now, we published a discussion paper on that, and we're working through all of the responses we got to that and our preliminary model as we work towards our future price limits consultation. That'll be out very soon. And that is designed to give the companies the incentives to look out at that long term and find the best way of meeting that long-term outcome, which might include more trading. Another thing we're looking at, and many of you talked to us about this, was the perceived Capex bias, and perhaps I should be more explicit and say own Capex bias. So the perception that if I'm a company, what I really want to do is build a nice big new boy's toy in my own area, which I'll get on my regulated capital value and get a return on in perpetuity, even though there may be a more efficient OpEx-based solution. And there's a perceived bias around our existing incentives on that. And we're looking at how to change that. And I'll give you a trailer here. You can expect us to talk quite strongly about the benefits and disbenefits of a TOTEX approach, putting the OpEx and CapEx together to try and remove this bias when we come out in our consultation later this year. Then we're looking at how can we incentivize exporters and importers. So people need to be willing to sell their water and buy water. And being really blunt about it, that means there needs to be money on the table, or people won't do it. And finally, when we look at this package and we're saying, well, let's say we can put together an effective package that incentivizes more water trading, where it's efficient, where it delivers, could we have unintended consequences? And we do have a concern that, in theory, if all the incentives were there for a water company, which has an abstraction license, which it pays for on a flat rate, not by volume, to take more water out of that already over-abstracted river, assuming there's some water in it, to sell. Well, if the incentives are there for it to do it, why shouldn't it do that? So we are looking at developing, and we're working very closely with the Environment Agency, and I have to credit WWF as well on this, to look at an incentive that would actually disincentivize taking water out of over-abstracted or water-stressed areas and incentivize the use of water where it's plentiful, because we'd need that to safeguard against even worse over-abstraction if water trading were to increase. Now, I'm going to pause there. What I've done is I've given you quite a lot of information on it, sets of packages of issues that we are developing, which are real tools and incentives to try and start addressing these issues We will be consulting on these over the autumn and the winter and into the spring, and we will want your engagement in how these might work. But before we get very excited about playing with lots of new regulatory tools, which is what these are, I want to come on to the innovation word, because what I'm talking about is change. It is new. It is different. It will feel different. It is innovation. And I think Rich has been very complimentary, and there has been innovation in the sector, and I do acknowledge that. But let's not kid ourselves here, okay? We don't have the best reputation as sectors go for being innovative. And I'll give you a few quotes. Martin Cave, in his report on the sector into competition and innovation back in 2009, rather politely commented that the water sector in the UK is not performing as well as it might in terms of innovation. David Gray, who I know will be talking to you shortly, in his more recent review, commented on, and I'll quote exactly from the report, a culture of compliance rather than innovation. He noted the risk-averse nature of the industry and a lack of initiative and innovation. Most recently, through some joint working with the OFT, the OFT published a study on the anaerobic digestion market with a particular focus on sludge. And that report said, quote, the water and sewage companies' apparent avoidance of risk, as opposed to the management of it, and associated reliance on guidance also appear to hinder the adoption of innovative solutions. Now, we are all responsible for this culture in this sector, and I'm standing up here as the regulator saying we take our share of that responsibility. We know that it's something we have to change together, because innovation is absolutely what we need in this sector. And I'm not sure whether collectively we have a touch of genius, but I can tell you we're going to need a lot of courage, because we are going to have to change the way we do things around here, and it's going to feel different. I want to talk to you now about one of the first steps in trying to change that culture. I want to talk to you about how OfWat is trying to change our culture, and how we are making proposals that we want to work with you on that are going to feel uncomfortable, but we're going to have to work with you on very closely to change. And it's the rather unexciting title of regulatory compliance, I'm afraid. Now, we published this consultation paper last Thursday, and I sent it out to many of you in this room, to all chief executives and managing directors of water companies, because I personally really want you to read this. I want you to think about it. Now, many of you remember why we started this project on regulatory compliance. That there are a set of reasons, but they include the plea from companies to reduce the regulatory burden, the data burden that goes with regular compliance. It included our acknowledgement of exactly the point in David Gray's report, that by creating this data mountain, we're all creating a false sense of security that all our assurance is built into this data, and we're not necessarily taking a proper risk-based approach to the sector. We recognized that we weren't seeing the wood for the trees. We collected all those, whatever it was, 8,000 tables worth of data every year, and we still needed whistleblowers to tell us what was going wrong in the sector. And we recognized we were building an unsustainable burden, and we need to change for the future. So this report proposes quite a number of fairly big changes. It looks innocuous enough, but if you stop and think about it, it's quite a big change in the way we do things. What we want to get away from is that culture of dependency, and what we want to get to is a mature industry managing its risks, not avoiding them, managing them much more effectively than the regulator managing them, and a regulator managing systemic risks and actually focusing our effort where it matters. So what we're proposing to do, number one, is, and you'll have heard me say that this is dear to my heart, the June return is going in the bin. We don't want it. we're proposing to stop collecting it in its entirety. Okay? Now, we are proposing that in parallel to that, we develop a new form of reporting, which would mean companies signing or publishing a risk and compliance statement. Standard regulatory accounting data would continue to be published, including separate accounting data, not least because we know various communities, including investment communities, find that data very valuable. And we're also proposing the development of a KPI dashboard, something that would monitor performance in a comparative way. And we're asking the question, even then, are we slipping back into the temptation of doing more of the same? Will we just build another data machine behind these KPIs? And so we're asking for your views on our suggestion that perhaps they should be sunsetted. Perhaps they should just fall away over time. We need you to think quite hard about this. The reason we need you to think about it is it will affect what you do in your day job. When you go to your board, having been through your audit committee and your board subcommittee assurance process and all of the June return data, and you can tell your board how you've performed in the June return, and you can tell them that you've had very few queries from OfWat, and you can assure them that that means you're doing fine. What are you going to do next year if that's not there? How will this change the way you work in your companies if we move to something different? And I've heard really varying views on this, from, well, it won't make a difference because we do it anyway, to, well, actually, that's a rather large team of people that won't be doing that anymore. I'll have to think about that. We need to hear about that, and we need you to think about it very seriously. The second half of this paper is about what we will do rather than what we will stop doing. What we're proposing is to use a prioritization framework or a risk-based framework, and all these words mean the same thing to us. A way of assessing what are the risks to service to customers and where might there be failures, and therefore where do we need to focus our efforts as a targeted and proportionate regulator. We need to focus on what matters, not on everything, because that way you, the companies, will be freed up to have your own assurance processes, to have your own way of managing your business, and we'll just be focusing on the things that are important, not on everything. And we'll be using a wide range of information to decide what to focus on, not just something like the June return. Since we've sent that out, we've already started to get a few reactions. This is what they are. The ones I find interesting is, are you mad? Are you throwing out the baby with the bathwater? And I find those ones quite interesting because we are responding to a call about overregulation and regulatory burden, and there's a certain feeling of, whoops, we better be careful what we wish for here. The other ones are essentially asking, how's it going to work? What's the detail? And what I want to say to you is that this is a consultation paper, but we are very firmly on the track of going down a risk-based approach and a proportionate approach to regulation and a change to our data collection. It is real. We need you to work with us to make that reality work, because it's going to feel real to you. It is a change in culture. We need to do this together. And there's plenty of opportunities for doing that. We will have our own, this is my plug for our Sustainable Water event, on the 22nd and 23rd of November. The 22nd will be a panel debate, but on the 23rd we'll be doing some really hands-on workshops about how we set price limits in the future and how what we're doing will affect you in your businesses. So, for example, one of our workshops will be for people who actually do the engineering work and decide how to manage networks. What will it mean to you if there are more incentives for water trading and that increases? How will it change your job? How will it impact on what you do on the ground? That's the kind of thing we need your help and engagement on. Throughout the autumn, we will be holding workshops specifically on that regulatory compliance paper, and I know I'm labouring it, but we really need you to think about how this will make a difference to your day job and help work with us in shaping that detail. So you have a chance to help us to make this work. We will have our much trailed future price limits consultation paper, which we always said in the autumn, and I'm now aiming in November. So you will see that as well, and that's something that we'll be talking about very much at Sustainable Water. Please take the opportunity. If you haven't already signed up, contact us. We're looking forward to moving from all of that really interesting blue sky thinking to making it real. We want you to help us. Thank you.